So David joins us in studio with a law expert to examine what is going on and what will likely happen today. Guys, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Scott and Tess. We're with Josh Kolsrud. He's been practicing law for 18 years. Josh, you've worked as a prosecutor. Now you're a defense attorney. You've been on both sides of things. Where can you see the trial going next for the prosecution?
Yeah, sure. So right now we have heard from the fact witnesses on the date of the homicide. We've heard from various police officers who arrived on scene after the murder occurred. We heard from fire department officials about CPR and whether or not CPR was performed. And now the prosecutor is getting into the meat of the case, the motive. Why did this happen? And the prosecutor has already started to develop that the motive was based on some type of pecuniary gain. That is, that Lori Vallow expected a huge payout from life insurance. And the prosecutor is also starting to develop a motive for the fact that Lori felt cornered, that Charles, her husband, was going to expose her to the church community. He was going to expose her extreme beliefs into the occult, and the fact that she didn't feel like she had to atone for any sins, and that was going to make her entire world crash down.
Is that pretty typical for a prosecution to start with the hard evidence, start with the day of the killing, and then move into the motive, as you spoke about, and going into friends and family testimony for that end?
Yes, you want to go through testimony that's really not very controversial first. The facts that you can't say did not happen. For instance, like, we all know that Charles died and that he died from gunshot wounds. We want to establish that fact first before getting into motive. Now, the motive part is going to be the juicy part of the testimony, and we already kind of saw that yesterday with both Nancy and Christina's testimony. And you kind of saw an exchange between Lori Vallow and Nancy where Nancy said, don't flatter yourself, saying this to Lori Vallow about when she was asked, were you talking about me the entire time that you were conversing with Charles? And so there was, an interesting exchange going back and forth. Now, interestingly enough, Lori chose not to cross-examine Christina. Now, this is actually a very smart move because, what Lori doesn't want to do is open the door to issues the prosecutor couldn't go into. And there are minefields all over the place with that witness. And I thought she did a really good job of not pursuing that avenue.
Not a lot of people know, but Lori is not shackled. She's wearing like an electric charge belt that she could get zapped by the bailiff in the courtroom if anything happens in there. You dealt with it as a prosecutor where a defendant was wearing one of these belts. What was your experience seeing a defendant wear one of these belts?
Sure. So defendants who are in custody are required to wear either a shock belt or a shock vest. And they have around 50,000 volts of electricity. And if a defendant gets out of hand, out of line, they have a deputy whose sole purpose in the courtroom is to press a button to incapacitate the defendant. Now, I did have a trial in front of the late Penny Gaines about 10 or 15 years ago. And after the defendant was found guilty, he abruptly got up and he acted like he was going to throw a chair and lunge at me. And the deputy in the courtroom pressed the button and he automatically went stiff and went to the ground. Then the defendant's family got up like they were about to, jump me, and Judge Gaines looks at me and he points at me and he goes, "You, me, out now." Wow. And we exited the courtroom, and luckily everybody was safe.
Pretty fascinating. Josh, thanks for joining us this morning. So far, thankfully, that belt has not been able to be used in this Lori Vallow Daybell case. Scott and Tess, last day of testimony today with what's been a pretty eventful first week of trial, guys.
Yeah, it sure has.